in a conflict situation, what you're trying to do is avoid your enemy or your competitor's strengths. You're trying to go around that. If you go head-to-head against your competitors, that's like a frontal attack. It's like attacking a fort head-on. And that's where the enemy has all its firepower, because he expects you to come that way. So it's the worst way to go. It takes a lot of resources, and you're probably not going to win. It's much better to go around the obstacles and around the existing competitors, around the existing positions. So the best example I can give of that, I've got two examples. One is very well known. It's back in 2007 when Apple was about to introduce the iPhone. So Jobs and Apple wanted to be present with a smartphone in the mobile computing and communications market. At that time, I know it's hard to remember, it's hard to believe it, but research in motion really had the most lucrative part of the market sewn up with the BlackBerry, the institutional and corporate markets, even government. And their key selling point was reliability and security. So that's where the money was, and that's where the big clienteles were. Instead of going up against that, what did Apple do? Apple went around that position, went around the BlackBerry and research in motion, and created the iPhone. And created the iPhone for the individual consumer, the individual user. And that allowed them to bypass research in motion. And once they had established themselves in that market, what started to happen? Users started to say, we want to be able to use the iPhone and then the iPad in our company, in our organization, in our institution. So without really trying to market actively to the corporate or the organizational market, Apple has started making inroads in that market. So it's just like water seeping in under your foundation. Once they had established themselves beyond research in motion, the water started coming back and seeping under the research in motion's foundations, and we see what the effect is today. Another example, I have a client, it's a small company, but and they're in the event management field, and one of their salespeople went to a trade convention and met with somebody who developed software applications for events. So they decided to implement this, create a joint venture, and to implement this with this joint venture partner. And they're having a lot of success with it. The advantage of this and why this shows following the path of least resistance is because it came from somebody fairly low down in the company, seeing an opportunity, and then the company's management said, let's reinforce this. Let's reinforce this suggestion, this innovative idea, and put resources behind it. And now it's starting to have a major impact on their business. So, and it's bringing them into a whole new space that they did not occupy even a year ago. Had they not done that, they would have been in a much more precarious position right now. And that's where a lot of their growth is coming from. And it's having a knock-on effect on other aspects of their business. So they can, who knows, maybe they'll be introducing other products. So this is the kind of thing, it doesn't have to be something massive like Apple introducing the iPhone. It can be small things like this. But when you've got people out there, if they know where you're going with the company and they know what the intent is, they can come back with these ideas and you can reinforce them and give them resources so that you're building on this success and introducing new product lines, new categories of products, new processes to continue growing. So that's the competitive and conflict sphere. What about in the sphere of cooperation inside the company? Like I said a while ago, you don't want to be in a win-lose situation. In competition and conflict, it's win-lose. But when you're leading a team, when you're leading a company, when you're managing people, or when you're working with suppliers or distributors or joint venture partners or strategic alliance partners, you want to create a win-win situation. And if you're talking also about your customers, you want it to be win-win-win. Now, I know it sounds tacky and campy, but it's true. You want everybody to get something out of the relationship. So in the military, the approach that builds on this and that aligns with natural proclivities and people's natural way of wanting to work and wanting to be as efficient as possible is called mission command. And this also follows the path of least resistance because of a couple of reasons. First of all, it exploits the already existing hierarchy. As you know, military units are very hierarchical. They're like pyramids. And there's a reason for that, because you have to break down responsibilities, because there's something called the span of control. There's only so many people that any individual commander can control. And it starts at the ground level with individual detachments and crews and sections, and then they're grouped together into platoons and companies and battalions and brigades and divisions, etc. So at each level, you've got commanders, you've got leaders, and they've got second in command, and in some case, staff officers. So it leverages the already existing chain of command, this pyramid that already exists. And most companies and organizations have these kinds of pyramidal organizations. Even the flattest ones, there's some kind of pyramid, some kind of hierarchy in place. What's that, sorry?
I was going to say somebody is at the top.
Yeah, and there's somebody at the top. The buck stops somewhere. But the other reason mission command works very well is because it exploits people's will or people's motivation to be autonomous, to be creative, and to show their initiative and use their own intelligence to solve problems and to achieve objectives. So in mission command, the basic philosophy of mission command is tell people what they need to achieve and why they need to achieve it, and then let them figure out the best way to achieve it. Now, it's not a free-for-all. You can't just do whatever you want. There are processes and procedures in place. There are, as we'd say in the military, left and right of arc. You know, you have constraints and restraints. You're told certain things you can't do or that you must do. But within that framework, you're free to innovate. You're free to use your initiative and to work with your team to develop novel approaches to solving problems. And that has a couple of advantages. In the first instance, when you come up against problems, which are inevitable in military operations, you come up against an enemy position that you did not expect was going to be there, so it screws up your plan. Well, if people know what the ultimate objective is and what the ultimate scheme of maneuver is, they can work around that and create a new plan on the fly. They can improvise and still attain the aim by going around that position or slightly modifying the mission or working with their peers in other organizations at the same level and coming up with an alternate plan so that they're achieving the aim. So the same principle can be applied in business. But for that, people need to know what the overall objective is. I'll get to that in a second. The other advantage and why it follows, so we can see it follows the path of least resistance there, but the other reason it follows the path of least resistance is that, as I said, people work better when they have control over how they do things. It's even better if they can contribute to the definition of objectives and define their mission and their vision. But if there are limitations on that and they have freedom of action to exercise their initiative and their imagination and creativity to come up with solutions and to control how they work, that has a major impact on individual motivation and morale and cohesiveness within an organization. So on two levels, it has an external benefit in that the organization is more adaptable. Somebody a while ago talked about flexibility and adaptability under chaos. If you truly exercise mission command, the organization is very flexible. So even though you got a very rigid structure and a very rigid hierarchy, people know what the overarching objective is, and they can work around problems to achieve the aim despite these obstacles that come up.